But anyway, should we talk about important things?
Like the productivity of the country?
Productivity of the country. Well, I mean, just before we get to that, I want to talk about inflation. Inflation announced 7 o'clock this morning, latest figures up from 2% in June to 2.2% in July. Look, we were dealing with 11% a couple of years ago. So, I mean, you know, what difference does that make? There were predictions it could be as high as 2.4%. It's a tick up. It's largely to do with energy prices. Had a big jump down last year, and it wasn't such a big sort of climb down this year. There are technical reasons why this happens, but is that anything to be worried about, do you think?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But largely because the world's largest shipping company, Maersk, they're the ones with the containers that you often see on the back of trains. They have forecast that inflation is likely to go up continuously in the second half of the year and into next year as a knock-on effect of what's going on in the Red Sea. Obviously, a lack of shipping going through the Suez Canal because of what's going on in Israel and the Houthis attacking them and things being forced to be redirected around South Africa. That adds massive costs, massive knock-on in terms of times, and it does cause delays ultimately. But
and the delays have costs.
Yeah, but it takes a little while for that to be sort of felt through into the system. But they have said, look, guys, that's coming at some point, and that's something to bear in mind. And then I think when you add on the fact that the Labour Party has sort of open season to say, actually, you know, we are in the business of giving public sector pay rises now, very large public sector pay rises, come one, come all. Inflation is going to creep up. Yeah. I don't think it's going to get to the levels that it was before the sort of catastrophic double figures, but
and of course all of this impacts whether or not, for instance, we have mortgage rates going down, interest rates. Now it's looking pretty unlikely we're going to see another interest rate cut from the Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England. But also, again, when you have interest rates up, that also impacts business, and that affects, you know, investment and how well businesses can do, and whether or not they're able to employ people. But it's been absolutely fascinating looking at the figures that came out yesterday regarding, you know, work-shy Britain. One of the headlines, you know, Sir Keir Starmer urged to get a grip of work-shy Britain, and that's the question I'm putting to you today. 1 in 5 people who are working age are not in work. 1 in 5 not in work. That's millions and millions of people. As I say, 9.4 million people. Some of them, you're a student, fair enough. They're not in full-time work, although, again, as Mike and I were saying, worked, you know, I worked, I mean, I used to finish uni on a Saturday, and on Monday I started work because I couldn't pay my bills otherwise.
I'm not sure it is a fair enough thing to say this XYZ person is a student. Given the amount of debt that students rack up, I'm not actually sure it's acceptable, except in, you know, very hands-on professions like medicine, for example. I think a lot of humanities students possibly could be subsidising what, you know, their loans with work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot are, but I just want to know what your reaction is to those numbers. Do get on the phone. So 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can WhatsApp the same number. Text us on 87222. You can get in touch on X at TalkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, and do have a look. I mean, I'm not as bleary-eyed as I sound. I promise. You can watch on YouTube, and you can put a message at the bottom, and that's for free, of course, as well. But listen, let's just go through some of the stats on this, because I mean they are astonishing. They really are. 9.4 million people of working age, so 16 to 64-year-olds, are not in work. So it's gone up 350,000 in just the last year. Well, what's that about? There are loads. I mean, there are jobs galore on offer. Maybe not in your Welsh former mining village, but you know what? There aren't any jobs. You know what you should do? You should move. Millions of people have done it. It's gone up 1 million since the start of the pandemic. 1 million. So that 9.4 million people includes 2.8 million on the long-term sick. That is a record high. Now, a large section of those people, they will be genuinely people who are genuinely ill, sick. You're being treated for cancer. You can't work. You've got a serious disability. You're unable to work. But it's a record high. We haven't suddenly miraculously got people who are that much sick in this country. 2.5 million are students, 1.7 million are looking after their families or stay-at-home husbands or wives, and 1 million have taken early retirement. Now, the early retirement, I think, is also an issue. People who can afford to do that, fine. But actually, can the country afford for those people to do that? Because unless you've been a high roller and you've paid an absolute whacking and you've got this great big pension pot, private pension pot, you know, we still need people to be contributing for as long as possible. And people are retiring in their early 50s, and people are doing that. It's astonishing. But the one I'm most concerned about, because they do cost us a lot more money, is the 2.8 million long-term sick?
I mean, just on the subject of those taking early retirement, I do think it's interesting that Labour has already floated the idea of potentially increasing the amount of pension contributions by both employers and employees in the private sector, because it is a well-known fact that as much as people like to say, well, I've paid into the system all my life, no, they have not, and they're costing too much. And actually, it is an awkward conversation that needs to be had about raising the retirement age. It's going to have to happen. I don't want it because it's going to affect me, but still, people are living longer, they're costing more. It will. On the subject of the 2.8 million on long-term sick, as you say, lots of people there are going to be unable to work. Lots of people actually are going to be physically unable to get to work, but will want to work. That's one of the. It was supposed to be one of the benefits of working from home, is that it would help those people.
How on earth does a physical disability prevent you from working when half the jobs now seem to be paper pushing at home?
I am curious to know actually what proportion of those are dependents on people who have come in from abroad, because we shouldn't sugarcoat it. That does happen. Actually, people recognise that we have a healthcare system that is free at the point of use, and that you can bring independence to this country. That will be part of it. Under the coalition government, Ian Duncan Smith was actually very effective at getting people out of long-term sick back into work.
I mean, he was so attacked, Ian Duncan Smith, but he genuinely, it was a mission for him. It was an absolute mission.
We have the capacity, be it people working remotely who can't walk or that sort of thing. We have the capacity now to massively reduce this in a way that even Ian Duncan Smith wasn't able to, because that sort of remote working wasn't possible. It has to be done because it's costing too much, and it's not heartless to say actually people who mentally, physically can work should be able to work, and also we should help. We should aim, because this is one of the other things we talk about, the mental health crisis in this country, and a lot of these people will be signed off long-term sick with mental health issues. Often what happens is they are just medicated. They're given a prescription for pills and going on your way. There is never a long-term plan to get those people off the medication.
But also, you've got stress or anxiety. Yes, I know. Look, I've all people having yapped on about it for the last few years know the impact on people's mental health from lockdown. But you know what? Sorry, it's 4 years on now. Well, 3 years on from the last one.
There has to be a pathway.
At some point, guys, you have to get back. This is my thing. Okay, I'm an atheist. This actually.
Where are we going with this?
No. This actually.
There is no God. Get to work.
This impacts my thinking on this one. As far as I'm concerned, this is it. This is it. That's all there is. You've got one life, and when it ends, and there's nothing else. Now, people who believe there is an afterlife, maybe it's worse ruining your life. Not living your best life. You've got to live your best life. You need to make sure that your family, your children live their best lives. Because if this is all there is, which is what I believe, it needs to be wasting your life watching daytime telly, sitting on a sofa all day, suffering from anxiety. That's not a life. That's an existence.
And if you are one of those people watching on YouTube, feel free to call in and let us know what you think about that.
Working from home, no, but I think it's just deeply, deeply sad. But I think it's also, I think it's a failure of the government.
Yes.
I think it's a failure of those working in those in the Brits office and allowing people to sign up. It's a failure of GPs. I've only got 10 minutes for you, so I'll sign you off. Not a problem. Off you go. And I think it's a massive failure of parenting as well, because as far as I'm concerned, if my daughter is not a contributing member of society, if I haven't got her the help she needs, if she did need any help, it would be my fault. Now, I also know parents who are struggling to get any help at all, even through the private sector, if they've got the money for mental health for their children. And I think the government's got a lot to blame for that. This government, as well as the last one, because Labour was cheering on all these lockdowns, and its long-term damage of that is catastrophic. And I said at the time, we're going to be living with this, kids are going to live with this for the rest of their lives. But we can't make an excuse. We've got to say, you've got to go to work.
It's why I find it, again, very concerning that one of the sort of first announcements that Bridget Phillipson made when she came in was that we're going to change education by having more sort of vocational stuff, more arts, more that sort of thing. Thinking, no, actually school is to educate and give purpose to people. It's to direct, it's to channel. And, it's all very well saying, oh, well, we want everybody to play the clarinet. Well, great. Is that actually going to solve, A, productivity, and B, actually mental health?
But that said, there's loads of evidence, actually, more sport and music and things that kids do, then they actually do well. But if there's a choice between clarinet lessons and learning how to add up, I'd go with learning how to add up.
Theatre kids are never happy. Think about it that way. Speaking as a former theatre kid.
I mean, this goes into another set of stats that's come out. The number of parents claiming disability benefits for children with conditions like ADHD and autism has surged by 200,000 since lockdown. In total, this is a 40% rise since 2019. There is a total. When you wonder where your money goes when you pay tax, guys, check this out. In terms of health and disability payments for children and adults in Britain every year cost us how much? £100 billion. So if you want to know where your taxes are going, that's where they're going. Now, as a civil society, civilised people, we should absolutely be wanting to make sure that those who've got a disability or their children have a disability, that we should look after them. However, and look, I mean, and Theo Ashwood, who's a regular on the show, you know, he's sitting in your seat, and he's got a severely autistic child. He's spoken about it publicly. I'm not revealing a personal bit of information. And lots of parents go through absolute hell. They really, and their children need an awful lot of help, and we should be there as a community and financially to help them. But I'm sorry, the ADHD thing. Most teachers I know who had to deal with this, they say the vast majority of the kids who have got, I suppose ADHD, yeah, you say you're waving your phone, they've got no routine, they've got no bedtime, they're living on fizzy drinks, they don't eat proper healthy food, the parents don't look after them. This is a parenting issue, not a medical issue.
A key part of their development, a key phase of their development was spent locked indoors with no access to their peers, relatively little access to their peers. I'm just not surprised at these numbers at all. You said it, it's in the report, since lockdown. That's the key thing there. We've seen an explosion there. And, you know, the thing is with autism... It
was already going up before, though.
It was going up before. Things like autism is being diagnosed more regularly. There are many reasons for that we don't have to get into, but it can be dampened, the sort of severity of it. And things like lockdown and the addiction to screens and things like that, that's not helpful. Actually, it can be better.
It's often the parents' addiction to screens because they're not talking to their children and not aware of their behaviour. I'll tell you what other motivation there might be, and that's her disability living allowance, because it's between £28 and £184 a week, depending on what your child needs. So if you get the full whack, you're looking at an extra £9,500 a year, and that also allows you to apply for a carer's allowance. That's £81 a week, and you can also get higher child tax credit, housing benefit, universal credit, and apply for a mobility vehicle, i.e. a car. There are lots of incentives. A lot of incentives for people to go on to these benefits and to declare their child has a problem, as opposed to maybe I need to be on top of it. That's not in any way to say there aren't completely genuine cases and we should be there for those people, but we could provide more help for those people and those families if we weren't dealing with every failed parent in Britain.
I think unless your child is severely autistic, and I really do mean severely autistic, actually there is no reason why parents should be taking these things, because as you say, it is a failure of parenting itself. And I'm sorry if it's difficult. Actually, people throughout time have had difficult children. They've had perfectly normal children who have tantrums.
No, but there are specific issues with autistic
severely
children.
autistic, yes.
But again, the ADHD.
But marginally autistic. I'm sorry, half of Westminster is populated by people who are autistic. They were fine growing up. They didn't need. Their parents didn't need. They turned out. I was about to say actually they turned out fine. Maybe they didn't. Given the state of the country, perhaps not.
But there is so much more I want to talk about. I mean, obviously, events, foreign affairs, but also the violent attacks against women on trains rising by more than 50%, according to a new report. I'm wondering, though, is it just reports of violent attacks because people are being encouraged to report this, but also who is actually committing these attacks? Because we have seen a rise in violent and sexual attacks on women across Europe. In particular places where there have been particular issues in terms of immigration. Now, I don't know. I do not know, but I wonder if the rise in attacks has any link whatsoever to the same rise in attacks that we have seen in Sweden, in France, in Italy, in Germany, in Austria. I don't know, but I wonder if those stats are even available, and if they aren't, I wonder why they aren't.